Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Weigel and I am an author and illustrator of graphic novels, and Alice has asked me to create a few videos to answer some questions for you guys this weekend as you consider how to create your own graphic novels. The first issue that she wanted me to address was setting. She asked when I first think of setting, and I guess I don't think of setting separately from the story. I usually come up with a story and the setting sort of suggests itself based on what's happening dramatically within the story to the characters. For a graphic novel artist, setting is a much more intimidating prospect than it is for a prose writer, I think. And let me give you an example of why I think that is. In a prose novel, a writer might spend a paragraph describing a situation where two characters walk into, say, a grand ballroom that has elaborate crystal chandeliers and all sorts of statuary all around, and maybe gilded moldings on the walls and a very elaborate marble pattern in the floor. Now, think about the difference in the amount of work that goes into having to draw that as opposed to just describe it. And on top of that, you also have to think about the geography of the room. The characters have to be able to stand in a convincing place. You have to be able to draw the perspective of the scene well and all the details of the scene. And when you're showing panel after panel of action occurring in that room, it has to be consistent throughout. You always have to know where, say, the staircase or a certain statue is, and make sure that if it's on a character's left on one panel, it stays there until you've clearly shown that the character has moved through that space and it's now someplace else. So there's a consistency to it that graphic novel artists have to worry about that prose writers might not necessarily have to worry about. Setting really is driven by the dramatic structure of the story and what you know has to happen to propel the story forward and the interactions between the characters. Then you sort of find the most appropriate place for those interactions to take place. A lot of times it's pretty obvious where those sorts of things are going to be happening. And I'll give you some examples from my book, Dragon Girl. The first important setting in Dragon Girl is a dark, eerie cave that Alana, the main character, stumbles across one day. And it's filled with these large dragon eggs. I want it to be a very mysterious sort of a place, and a lot of action unfolds in this cave. And I need to make sure that as I first show the setting, it's going to accommodate all the things that have to happen in it. I know that there have to be dark passageways at the very back of the cave because something's going to be coming through those passageways later on in the story. And I also know that it has to be a pretty large space because I want it to be very dramatic, and how many eggs are in there is important. The fact that there are a lot of them. And it also has to be a large, high-ceilinged cave because later on a large dragon is going to be entering that space to help propel the story along. And so I need to know those things up front and design the space so that it's going to fit those aspects of the story later on. The most dramatic and important setting in the book is the valley, the secret valley that no one knows exists, where all these dragons exist together. And it's really important when I reveal that place, that setting for the first time in a double-page spread that you're seeing here, that I make this a convincing space, that it's something that really fills the reader with a certain sense of awe at having discovered this wonderful valley full of dragons. And I'm trying to tell you how expansive the space is and how secluded it is. And also I'm trying to tell you about the wide variety of residents it has. You can see a variety of different dragons sort of crawling around on the cliffs and flying through the air here. And so this is really my chance to establish what this place is going to be and give the reader a good first impression of it. There's one setting for the story that actually becomes almost a character unto itself, and that's this ship, this airship called the Dragonfly. I spent a lot of time designing this because a lot of the action either happens on it or rotates around its presence in the valley. I really wanted this to be a vehicle that would capture the imagination of the reader. This shows you an example of what the Dragonfly looks like inside. And there's a lot of thought into what you're seeing here. I wanted to make sure that the place looked as light as possible since it's suspended in the air by a balloon. So you'll notice all these beams in the walls have these cutouts, which seems like the logical thing for the designer of the craft to do to sort of minimize the weight of those beams. I imagined the floors of the craft to be made of wicker so that they would be extra light. I also wanted it to have a very sort of 19th century steampunk mechanical feel to it. Along with all the character detail in this thing has to go with the fact that it has to be a setting for the story, for the characters to move through. And you'll see I'm thinking about that too. You see that staircase in the background, that's going to be an important spot for the story in a few minutes as a character descends down that and we see them up close for the first time. Also other details like the controls for the winch that has lifted that cage that the girl is in up through the floor of the thing, and the hatch is closed. All those sorts of functional details of the setting have to be taken into account and depicted accurately. It's all about trying to make the reader believe in the place that they're seeing. This is the top deck of the Dragonfly, and you can notice the details that I've built into it, again, to try and make the vehicle more convincing. Some of the details that I've added to this to try and make it believable are you see the arms coming off the side of the deck that go up to hold the sides of the balloon, and all the ropes that are attached to the underside of the balloon that attach it to that cone there that the hot air comes up through to fill the balloon. You see the steering column up near the front of the deck. And you'll also notice the stairway that the character is going up in the back. And that's a carryover from that last image that you saw, because the lower deck has to go with the upper deck, obviously. And so I have to take that into account and make sure that that staircase that I showed earlier leads somewhere and how it might connect to the top deck. All of these things are part of what I think of as the geography of the setting, so that I know the characters can live in and move through that environment convincingly. The Dragonfly was such an important setting that you can see I actually diagrammed out the whole space so that I knew where the living quarters were, where the laboratory was, where the mechanical deck was, all of those sorts of things that an airship might actually need to be a living space. So I had a pretty clear idea of where everything was and where characters had to be within the vehicle at any given time during any given scene. You can also see that I tried to depict it from different views, top and side and front, and all of those different views that might come into play as I try and show it throughout the course of the story. I hope all this gives you a little insight into all the detail and thought and consideration that goes into creating believable settings in a graphic novel. I have an exercise for you to adjust to the idea of doing settings and using them consistently in a graphic novel. What you're seeing here are some images of the house that the boy and girl live in Dragon Girl. The exterior of the house, and then you see the interior where the outside door is shown, and some of the details, a lamp and a table there against the wall and where the windows are placed. And in this scene you see another view of the room where there are bunk beds and a dining table and a few other things in the scene. What I do when I have an important setting like this is I will actually diagram a floor plan of that so that I can keep all the details of where everything goes clear in my head. And what I'm suggesting is that if you have a setting in your graphic novel, that you do a similar sort of a floor plan so that you know where all the objects in the room are stationed and where the characters will be in relation to them at any given time, regardless of what the action is in the room. So try that. Take a setting from your graphic novel and see if you can do a little floor plan. It will help you understand the setting a little bit better, and it will also give you a little frame of reference for how to depict the scene as the characters move through it.